So,
All
Bob
right.
Burg, welcome to the Grateful Podcast. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Jack, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Bob, you wrote with John David Mann, The Go-Giver, which is now one of my favorite books in the world. All my favorite books, they follow a certain structure. I'd like to hear your input on this, but it's like The Alchemist and Siddhartha and the Celestine Prophecy, where they're stories, right? They're stories
Yeah.
that have a lesson behind them, and they're stories that feel realistic, but they have such practical lessons in them. Why'd you decide to write The Go-Giver in that format?
Yeah. Well, those books you mentioned are some of my favorites as well. The reason why is just because stories tend to connect with people on a deeper level. I mean, all my books before that were how-to books, and
Mhm.
all of them since, except for one, um, have been how-to books. So I'm really a how-to writer. John was really the magic in this book because he's such a great storyteller. But yeah, stories connect on a heart-to-heart level, and I think when that's the case, the person reading it is much more able and much more likely to be able to embrace the message and be able
Mm.
to apply it right away. And that's really what we're wanting to have happen. So how-to books I think are also very important. I've read thousands of them, and I
Mhm.
also love parables because I get something from every parable that I read, as well. So I think both have its place, but they have a different type of impact.
I love that. I think in the world today, we have an information overload. I know that you're familiar with Bob Proctor, and I've learned a lot from Bob, and he talks about the knowing doing gap being one of the biggest causes of frustration in the world. The
Sure.
difference between what you know and what you act on. And I tend to think that stories and parables take that information that you might get in some type of how-to format and in the normal self-help book category, and they take it one step further into action, because when we actually are going to act upon something that comes from a belief or a story that we're telling ourselves. And I think that when we can connect to someone else's story, as we do in The Go-Giver, it can take us one step closer to the action of implementing what we learn?
Yeah. And Bob Proctor, who you mentioned, we really used him as a kind of an unofficial model for Pindar
Mhm.
because Bob was just a fantastic human being. He embodied everything in terms of prosperity mindset, and he was such a giving and just a fantastic person. And whenever I
Hmm.
saw him at events, after the book came out, I'd always refer to him as Pindar, and he always smiled. He always liked that. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think there's a lot. And remember too, with the Go Giver, one of the only condition that the mentor Pindar gave Joe was that he had to apply the
Mm.
information. Right, that very day, in order for Joe to be able to keep working with him. And so that's why people say, well, is the opposite of a go-giver a go-getter? And we say, no, we love go-getters because go-getters take action.
Mm.
And we all know, and as you pointed out, without action, you can have the best ideas, the nicest intent, the greatest of, whatever, but without action and put into the mix, nothing's going to happen. It simply cannot happen.
Mm.
So we say be a go-getter, someone who is very action oriented, and a go-giver, someone who's absolutely, totally laser focused on providing immense value to others. Be a go-getter and a go-giver, just don't be a go-taker. That's that person
Mhm.
who feels entitled, if you will, to take without having added value to the person, to the process, to the situation.
I love that. I love that. When did you learn this in your life? Because honestly and transparently, I've only started to learn the value of giving value and only become a go giver in this past year. And up until then, I unintentionally tried to take. I thought that's what people did.
That's
Where
right.
what's your story about how you became a go-giver?
Well, I mean, I was very lucky to have parents who really embodied these principles. So I got to see that growing up, and John said the same thing with his parents. So we were both fortunate in that regard. I know with me that when I started in business and in sales and so forth, you see people doing things certain ways. Some are congruent with your beliefs and others aren't. And you see some people who really do things in a good, healthy way and focus on others and they're very successful. And you see others who seem to do that and they're not successful. And then you see
Mm,
others who are go takers who are not successful, but you see some go takers who seem financially successful. However, you start to see patterns develop, right? You see
mm,
patterns develop. And what I noticed is 95% of the time, those people who had sustainable success, and we're talking financial, spiritual, mental, emotional, social, relational, okay? These are the people whose focus was on how they could bring value to other people. Now, not in a self-sacrificial way. Okay, not in a way that was that was hurting themselves or anything like that. No, it's just that their attitude was to make everybody around them better off, right?
mm.
To again, we would say, bring value to others, make that your focus. And those were the people time and time again, okay, who just seemed to really have it all together. And that's who I wanted to emulate.
Huh. I love that. It begs the question for me, and I was just recording a solo podcast downstairs in another studio space. I was asking just myself, why is it that growing up, I had this impression that in order to be rich, you had to be a taker? Why did I think that the most successful people on earth, I almost didn't want to be successful because I thought of that as being
I know.
someone who's a taker.
I know. Because that is the message that the world gives us, unfortunately.
Mm,
And, for many people, it's a combination of upbringing, environment, schooling, news media, television shows, movies, popular culture, cultural mores, everything you see on social media. It's just, we're inundated with negative messages, anti-prosperity messages, anti-abundance, anti-money,
mm,
anti-business, right? And you see it all the time. You watch a TV show or you watch a movie and my friend Randy Gage, who speaks on prosperity mindset, and who's a guy who really changed his life through studying prosperity and becoming the embodiment of this. He says if you watch any popular movie, there are typically two types of people who are portrayed. There are the good people who are usually portrayed as kind and honest, but usually poor and struggling, but they're
mhm,
happy, right? And then you've got the other person because these people, these poor, good people are always taken advantage of, stepped on, stepped over, pushed around, pushed aside by who? The evil rich people who are mean and nasty and horrible and cowardly and have no soul, right? And this is what you see all the time. Now, Randy gives a great example, by the way.
I had a friend the other day that came up to me and told me how much this show means to him right now, how much value he's getting out of it, how much he's learning, and he wanted to show me his favorite episode of the show. So he pulls out his phone and he pulls up YouTube, and when he gets to my account, he wasn't subscribed. Now he thought it was so embarrassing. I kind of found it hilarious, but it prompted me to look at the statistics, and I found out that 62% of you are not subscribed to the channel. Now that's all right. I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, but if you get value out of the content that me and my team are putting out there for you, if you feel like this is improving your life and the Grateful Podcast is having an impact on you and you want it to keep getting better, then the one simple free thing that you can do for me and my team is hit that subscribe button. It shows the world that we have value to give, and it helps us continue to show up better each and every week, bringing on better guests, increasing the production quality, and putting out more content for you guys to continue to show up better in the world for tomorrow. So, if you feel like this has any value for you, I would encourage you just to hit that button. And I really, really appreciate the impact that we're having on the world together. You're a part of this journey, and that's one of the coolest things. You have made an impact by being here, by sharing the knowledge and the wisdom that you gain, and by applying it into the world and creating a ripple effect. So thank you. Now let's get into the episode.
He talks about the first Spider-Man movie. This was the one with Tobey Maguire. It was years ago. You were still a little kid at the time, and there's a scene where Peter Parker and his Uncle Ben are in the living room, and they're talking about being poor. And Uncle Ben says, "Well, Peter, we may be poor, but at least we're honest." What a horrible, horrible message for some young teenage boy or teenage girl to see, because what's the presupposition, right? That if you're honest, well, you've got no chance, pal, of ever having a lucrative, life. But if you are successful in terms of financial, if you're financially wealthy, you must have done something wrong to get there. And that's like, and you just said, right? You almost didn't want to be successful and wealthy because it would have meant that you had to be a taker and a ruthless and horrible and right? And now,
Mm,
by the way, it doesn't mean there aren't horrible people who do things and get financially wealthy, those go takers, but it's typically harder to do well as a go taker. It really is, because first you got no one on your side. You're not doing it based on relationships. Sometimes go takers they're able to just work at it longer and harder, or they have some special skill. But if you look at but it's hard to sustain, and also their personal lives tend to be horrible, right? And,
mm,
and unhappy. It's so much easier to do well as a go-giver. It's
yeah.
again, there's nothing self-sacrificial about it. But again, those are the mess, and that's in answer to your question. That's the reason why. So here's my suggestion to people: to really make a study of prosperity and seek out those teachers who do such a wonderful job. They write books on it. They do videos. They speak on it. Right, like Randy Gage, like Sharon Lecter, like Lisa Peterson, Ken Honda, David Nagel, the late Bob Proctor in his books, Ellen Rogan. There's just a number of people, Derek Kinney. They all speak on this topic. And, again, 99% of what they talk about is simply getting past the mental blocks
Mm,
that keep you from the prosperity you deserve through the value you provide. And so, yeah, that's you bring up such a wonderful point, and our belief systems become filled on an unconscious level. This is never conscious, by the way. Most people don't say, "Hey, I think I'll sabotage myself from success because I think," no,
yeah.
but they do, because that's what's been put into their heads and into their hearts. And when you hear someone say, millionaires shouldn't exist, or billionaires shouldn't exist, or trillionaires shouldn't exist, question the premise and
Mm,
ask yourself why.
mm,
Because assuming that person made their money honestly, and that is through providing products and services that other people wanted and willingly paid for because they felt it would make their life better, ask why there shouldn't be millionaires or billionaires or trillionaires. And ask, how many jobs has this millionaire, billionaire, or trillionaire created?
mhm,
Right? So that the economy could grow, so that the people who work for them could then spend their money at stores and restaurants and shops and so forth, in order to, right? And ask the question, well, why shouldn't they exist? How much would the world be better if they didn't? How would it be? And how did the person who's telling you that millionaires or billionaires or trillionaires shouldn't exist, how did they come across that? What economic principle or law of human nature have they learned and studied that would cause them to be so confident in saying this?
mm. The other interesting thing is what I notice among people is those who are just at the cusp of being like that much more materially successful. Like, let's say the differentiator between good and great, those who are at that high end good, they're the ones who are the most go taker. They're the ones who have then inadvertently set a ceiling for themselves where they won't become the great success that they really do want, because they're saying, "Hey, no, I can't take that meeting. I can't give you my time. You're not worthy of my time." And it's this ego that builds up. And what I found is among the most successful people I've talked to, in the common markers of success, they are the most generous. They are the most caring. They are the most giving people. And I love that. I love that. I love being able to give that answer when people ask me, what's the one trait you've realized among the most successful people you've talked to? I love being able to say they're the most generous and caring people I know. It feels
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah, I know, and again, and if someone says, "Well, but not all of them," no, of course not. It's a big world. Not everyone is everything, but but yeah, that part in the book where Pindar talked about asking Larry King, in the green room of an event, about what's the what is the difference maker within, and Larry said, for someone to reach that really special level of success, they've got to be someone who really wants to give of themselves and is most likely to. Well, that was from a conversation I had with Larry King in the green room before an
Mm,
event back in the '90s. So a lot of times, so that was that was something that a guy who's interviewed how many thousands of people that he noticed. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? And so yeah, and it's something I've always noticed. Now the people who are on the cusp, they're certainly not all go takers, but the ones who by any means, but the ones who are really going to get to the next level are probably a lot more go-giver-ish.
Mm,
And,
yeah.
and that's what those are the things that allow them. So it's not that you succeed despite doing these things, you succeed because of doing those things. And
Mm.
again, these are just, universal laws and principles, nothing that John and I, actually made up.
My friend Allison just told me this mind blowing statistic by organizational psychologist Tasha Urich. 95% of us believe that we're self aware, but only 10 to 15% of us really are. And I believe that that gap is the difference between good and great performers in this world. The greatest people that I've interviewed on this podcast understand their capabilities and what they're good at better than everyone else. And they understand what they love to do and how they show up for the people around them. I imagine that when you heard me say that statistic, somebody in your life popped up that doesn't truly understand the way that they show up for other people, and they have some type of misperception between their identity and the identity that others have attached to them. And maybe that's you, which is why I believe so deeply in Interview. Interview is a software that allows you to take a self-assessment and compare it to anonymous feedback from the people closest to you in your life, revealing your gap in self-awareness and helping you close it. So if you've ever been curious about how you show up for the people around you, or you want to improve your self-awareness, head to yourinnerview.com, yourinnervue.com, and use the code GRATEFUL20 for 20% off a Tier 1 interview assessment, plus a complimentary coach-led debrief on your report. Let's get back to the podcast. I love that. So the people that are very successful, that are not givers, that are not generous, they've succeeded in spite of that. And the
Yeah,
people that have succeeded that are givers, they've succeeded because of that trait.
exactly. Yeah.
That's incredible. So I'm 19. A lot of people listening to this, watching this, are young people that they don't have the financial resources to be extremely generous with, right? They haven't created an abundance of success in their lives yet that they're looking to create. So how can people give before they have a lot to give?
Yeah, well, giving doesn't necessarily just mean money. That's a nice thing, and, as you're starting to make money even when you don't have a lot, get into the habit of, giving 10% if that's what you want to do, or whatever it is you feel called to do. And so that, if you're making $1,000, 10% of that is $100. But when you're making, $1,000,000, 100,000, and it's easier to give, more when you're wealthy, when you were giving when you weren't wealthy. But let's go back to that. As far as them not having money, what do they have to give? Again, the money is just one element of what of the value you can provide. If you're working as a server in a pizza restaurant, or if let's just say you have your own lawn mowing business or a car detailing service or something like that, okay? You charge a certain amount of money in order to detail that car, but what's the value that you're providing? You're making sure to do this job with excellence. so that this
Mm,
car absolutely sparkles inside, in out. You make sure to clean up the area around there, right? To make sure to talk to the people who are your customers with ultimate respect. When they say hi, you don't say how you doing, you say good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending upon the day part. When you, instead of telling them to, feel free to call, you say feel welcome to call, because feel
mm,
welcome is a much more effective way than saying feel free. It means you're consistent in everything you do. It means you're paying close attention to that person as a human being. Okay.
mm,
It means you empathize, and it means that you always consistently show appreciation. It means you send a handwritten thank you
mm.
note to them for their business. When they refer you to somebody, you send a handwritten thank you to
I
them.
love that.
Okay. So
Yeah.
there's all sorts of ways. And as you're starting out with someone, even if it's a matter of picking up their dry cleaning somewhere, or sweeping floor, doing whatever you need to do, there's all sorts of ways. It might be that there's an older person who maybe has shared some wisdom with you, that you see that on their computer, there's something you could do that they don't know how to do, that you could help their page look better. So I'm just saying there's all sorts of things that it
Mm.
doesn't take money to add value to people.
I love that. And in order to know that about someone, where you can give value, you have to start to get to know them and ask questions about them
Ah,
and their lives. You have to get curious, right?
perfect. Absolutely. Again, it goes back to belief systems, and we tend to feel as human beings that what we believe is of value is what others believe is of value, and it's just not true. So the only way that we can know what another person values is to ask questions and listen. And
Mm,
as you said, very, very nicely, with great wisdom for a 19-year-old or for a 40-year-old, be curious. Be curious.
mm,
Um, not judgy. Not thinking you already know. Be curious, because the world has a lot out there. When I was 19 or 20, 21, whatever, I was so sure I knew everything about everything.
mm,
And Mark Twain is credited with a saying, and I don't know if he ever said this or not. There's no record of it, but he could have. It sounds very Twainian. But the saying was, "It isn't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you're absolutely sure you do know that just ain't
mm,
so." And so instead of thinking that ask. Have a mind that's open,
mhm,
and consider, again, question premises, and ask why. Why is this so?
mm.
How does this person know that? Where did they learn it from? What principle is it based on?
Do you know the platinum rule?
Sure. Well, it depends. There's many types, but where the golden rule is do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. The platinum rule, which was developed by Tony Alessandra and Jim Cathcart, is do unto others as they would be done unto. Is that the one you're talking about?
That is, and I find it just so, so good, and especially if you pair it with the 5 love languages and the idea
Mm,
that, like, the way that we want to give a gift, the way that we wanna give somebody love or show our love might not be the best way for them to
yeah.
receive it, and I think that a lot of times we can run around trying to pour all of our energy into a bucket, let's say, someone's love that they feel is an imaginary bucket, and if we're giving in our favorite language to give in, but it's not their language that they receive it in, we both end up with empty buckets because we pour our entire bucket into theirs and it falls out. And sometimes I think we have to go a little bit further to give in the way that they want to receive. So then we both end up feeling good.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful point. And when you talk about that in terms of the 5 love languages, um, both people's buckets seem empty, and neither of them knows why. They
Yeah.
can't understand why that other person doesn't totally appreciate what they just did, and that
Hmm.
other person doesn't realize why that person would do that thing that they did. So that's a book that I believe everybody should read. The 5 Love Languages, Dr. Gary Chapman. I
Yeah.
think that Dr. Gary Chapman. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's incredible. So Bob, I'm so curious about you and your story. And at my age, what were you doing to implement the go giver mentality before you ever wrote the go giver? or had thought of even that need. Just a quick note from me, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify and you've enjoyed this episode so far, the one thing that you could do to create a better podcast for the future, yes, you're a part of this, is to leave a review. Leave a 5-star review or a 4-star if you think I deserve it. I hope I'm not below that. And just tell the world what you really think of this podcast, how it's supported you, how it's helped you grow, what you've learned. And it would also help me just understand how I can continue to show up better for the world and create a better place for people to learn and grow. Thank you.
Well, your age, I wasn't doing any of that stuff.
Mm.
You're far ahead of where I was at 19. Believe me. It's probably in my mid-20s, mid to late 20s, when I got into sales. I guess it was mid-20s when I got into sales. Really, that's where my education began, because not only was I reading books on sales, but
Mm-hmm.
the books on sales I was reading was suggesting that I read books on personal development.
Mm-hmm.
So once I started to get books like, Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, Schwartz's The Magic of Thinking Big, Hill's Think and Grow Rich, and, Klassen's The Richest Man in Babylon, and Maltz's Psycho-Cybernetics, and, all
Mm.
those, all these classics. And I started really getting into these. I began to understand that success is really an inside job. It manifests outwardly, of course, but it begins in here, in the head, and then in the heart. And it's not just taking in the information, as you said earlier, it's applying the information.
Mm.
Uh, and so, once I began doing that, once I became a student of life, uh, that's when things really started to change for me.
Mm. Sales really was the entry point to personal development, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So, a question I've had reading your book and then How to Win Friends and Influence People, and I asked a guy named the People Displeaser about it, Nick Pollard. He was one of my first ever bigger guests on my show almost 2 years ago. And we talked about the line between being a giver and someone like Dale Carnegie, who his, I guess, caricature of the book would be, and the people pleaser. Because I think that there are a lot of people here in this world right now that they are people pleasers to a fault. Where do you think that line can be drawn?
Well, first, I don't think Dale Carnegie was writing about being a people pleaser.
No, I don't either. I think applied to an extreme level, it could be. But
Anything
yeah,
applied to an extreme level is, by nature, probably not healthy.
yeah.
Um, you know, b so where is the line? So, here, I would say it this way. There's nothing, and I alluded to this earlier, but I think it's really such an important point. There's nothing about being a go-giver that in any way is congruent with being a doormat or a martyr or self-sacrificial in any way. Okay.
Hmm.
So it simply means you understand the focus of the importance and the benefit of focusing on another person. So let's take sales and then let's take leadership. Okay. So so when I was on the road speaking for many, many years, I'm 68 now, so I'm not on the road anymore. But for years I was, and I'd often speak at major sales conferences. And one of the first things I would say is nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet. Okay.
Yeah.
They're not going to buy from you because you need the money or because you have a sales goal or because you want to send your kid to a nice school. They're not even going to buy from you just because you're a nice person, even though you probably are a very nice person. People are going to buy from you. They're going to do business with you because they believe that they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so. And that's the only reason why anyone, who is based in reality should expect anyone to buy from them, from you, from me, from anyone else. Okay. And so it's actually for a sales professional or any entrepreneur, anyone who's selling a product or service, it's actually in our best interest to put our self-interest aside and focus totally on that other person and their needs.
Mm.
their wants, their desires. Again, don't confuse that with being a doormat or self-sacrificial. We're still getting paid a lot of money, okay? And you should make a very healthy profit because you're selling on high value to a person. You're selling them something that's going to help them in their life, okay? But your focus must be on them because that's
Mm,
what they care about. Okay. So there's nothing people pleaserish about that other than, well, you are pleasing them, but in the way that it's the term people pleaser is often used, as though it's self-harmful. No, not one single bit. It's the same as a leader. Nobody's going to follow you because you have a goal. They're going to follow you because they know you, they like you, they trust you, they believe in you, and they believe their life is going to be better off by following you and buying into your message than by not doing so.
hmm.
So it's just, really cool that the way life works is that to the degree you focus on bringing value to other people, that's the degree that your success will grow.
I love that. Bob, that's incredible. I always want to end this on gratitude just because that's been the name of the
Sure.
podcast. And that's been, I believe, the reason behind a lot of the biggest givers in the world. I think so many times the most ambitious people can almost procrastinate the present moment until they achieve a certain thing. So they say, I'm going to keep moving the goalposts further and further and further along. Right. And I realized in my life, I needed to counteract that and go, and instead of just ambition, bring gratitude into the picture and be grateful now while still chasing forward and achieving more. So
Uh,
what are you most grateful for in your life that continues to ground you as you continue to achieve?
yeah. Well, let me say first how on target you are. There is a book that I would suggest everybody get. It's a short book, but it's probably the most I've read it probably 60, 70 times. It was published in 1910 by a man by the name of Wallace D. Wattles, and it's
Mhm.
called The Science of Getting Rich.
Mhm.
And in this book, he has, three different principles to follow, okay? And the third one is gratitude. And it's not about being grateful after you've attained success. It's understanding how and why gratitude will actually help you attain that success.
I love it.
Okay. Now, if you get the book, it was written in 1910, the copyright ran out. So there's a lot of people who they publish it along with their own, thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. But my feeling is get the original. Make sure that when you order it, that it's an original version of his 1910 book, because it's always great to have the original source there. But yeah, gratitude is that important. When you think about it, gratitude is the trait that makes happiness possible, because when
Mhm.
you could have all the blessings in the world, and I'm not even talking about necessarily a yacht or a plane, although if that's what you can afford and brings you joy, then by all means do that. But I'm talking about just the ability to hear, to see, to taste, to smell, to feel, to have a roof over your head, to have meals that you can eat, to have a cup of coffee, and to be able to breathe, and to have friends and family, and I mean all these blessings you can have. If you're not grateful for them, it's really the same as not having them,
Mm.
right? And you can't possibly be happy. Right. So gratitude really is a huge, huge part of success, both personally and professionally.
I love that. Bob, thank you so much for your time. I love the impact you've made on the world. It's incredible.
Oh, well, Jack, I love what you do. And at your age, I can only imagine the impact you're making now, but also that you are going to be making throughout the years. So congratulations on what you've accomplished so far and on all the stratospheric success still to come.
Stratospheric. I love it. Thank you, everybody. This has been the Grateful Podcast. We did it! We made it to the end of the episode. Thank you so much. And thank yourself for showing up and committing to yourself to better yourself and your life for you and the people around you tomorrow. It's really impressive. I know with the attention spans that we have today, showing up for an hour, or however long today's episode was, is really impressive. So thank you. I have one ask for you. Before we go, before we move on from our days together, who did you think of today while you were listening, while you were watching? Who popped into your head during the best moment of today's episode? Whoever it is, you can send a time-stamped version of this episode with that certain moment that made you think of them to that person. And when you do that, they're going to feel so seen by you. They're going to feel so loved by you. I know it can be a little weird, but you can just say, hey, this made me think of you. And when you do that, you create a ripple in the world. You serve. You make this world a better place. So I encourage you, if you had someone that popped up today that you think of with this episode, who you think this could help better their lives and the lives of the people around them, then please send this over to them. Create a ripple. Make an impact. That's how we change the world, one person at a time. That's my goal. I want to change your life. I want you to go and change others. That's how a legacy is built. So I thank you for showing up today for yourself and the people around you to make this world a better place. Don't forget that no matter what you're going after, what gap you have between where you are and where you want to be, no matter how big it is and no matter how much anxiety that might create for you or how much excitement that creates for you, there's a present moment. Stay here. Be grounded. Be grateful for all the things and the people you have around you as you continue to go and serve the world and make this world better. I'm proud of you, and I'll see you next week. Stay grateful. Stay hungry. This has been the Grateful Podcast. Thank you.